we could all probably agree that uh, that we individually love life. I love life. I want to be free of suffering. It's a bit difficult to be free of suffering, but because of the nature of this very existence, it's very difficult to be free of suffering. And but we all want that, and we also want to be treated fairly and justly, and we don't want people to exploit us. And and so this is what we want for ourselves, and hopefully we want that for other people. But there's a group that we don't consider, and that is the sentient beings that we are eating, that are on our plates, that we're wearing on our backs, and that we're using for other reasons. We don't think about that because we've been indoctrinated to believe that these sentient beings are here for us to use. It's a very, very powerful indoctrination because rarely does anybody really think about it. And it's so powerful that sometimes when it's brought to our attention, that depending on how it's brought to our attention, for example, you might be watching this and you may not be vegan, and you're wondering, what is she talking about? Sentient beings on our plates. You might be thinking that and wondering what I'm going to say next. Well, the way we could look at it is, say, if you're living with, say, a dog or a cat, and most people have good relationships. They really love the cats and dogs that they live with. They really do. Many people consider dogs and cats family members. And after a little while of being with a dog or a cat, one can see that they have distinct personalities. They have likes and dislikes. They can have a mischievous nature. They show affection and they can receive affection. They have relationships with others, and that means not only non-humans, but they have relationships with other people in the house. They don't want to feel pain. They have different things that they want to do. Like dogs, they may want to go out and for a walk. Cats, show different preferences to where they would like to sleep, who they'd like to sit on their lap. If they are able to go outside, when they want to go outside. They have all sorts of, just like we do, they have all sorts of interest in life, and they love life just like we do. Now, if we think about that, and then we just consider that the sentient beings that we consider farm animals, we see them in the fields, and they're just animals in the fields, and we think, oh, isn't that a lovely sight, seeing these happy cows in the fields. And we may not even see them as the flesh that's on our plates, or the secretions in our glass with our cup of tea. We don't see that. We just see them as animals in the field. And then we go home and we have a steak, and then we have we have a glass of milk, we have yogurt or cheese with that meal, and we don't think about it in relation to those animals. It's like they're two different things. But then if somebody raises the issue that they're sentient beings, we might get defensive because we don't want to think that, we don't want to put those two things together. We don't want to think about those animals that they are one day going to be killed. They're in those fields, if they're lucky, and I put that in quotes because most animals aren't in large fields grazing. Most are in industrialized settings, and that includes chickens that are being used for eggs, and quote unquote beef, and quote unquote dairy cows are being kept in large sort of industrialized settings as well. But we don't put together that even the ones that are in the fields, or the ones that are, or the hens that are being raised are being used for eggs, and that includes the free-range ones. I put in quotes free-range, or the ones in the factory settings in those tiny cages, and that includes enriched cages. We don't think about those animals that one day they're going to be killed because one day they're going to be of no use to that industry. They're going to be past their productive stage, what the industry thinks is past their productive stage, and therefore they're of no economic value, and therefore they're killed. And so that includes those in the fields, and they end up in the same horrific slaughterhouse as the ones that are in those industrialized settings. And that includes the hens used for eggs, and they end up being horrifically killed as well. So they live a very suffering life, most of these animals who are on our plates, and then they're killed in these horrific slaughterhouses that are just horror houses. If you've never been to one, you should consider going to one. They're all horror houses. So that's these cows and hens and sheep and goats, all the animals we consider domesticated farm animals. There's no real difference between those farm animals and the dog or cat that we're sharing our lives with, that we consider family members, who we consider their preferences and try and make them happy. Most of us do that. And when we hear that they've been injured, or that they're sick, or that we hear that there's dogs or cats being killed by the millions in shelters, hopefully we think how awful that is. These cows and hens and sheep and goats, and they're all like these dogs and cats who we love and live with. And all these animals, all of them, including the dogs and cats we live with, and we've given the dogs and cats names, all of them are considered property by our society, simply because they're another species. That's the only reason. They have other ways of expressing themselves. They have other amazing talents, behavioral abilities, and they have all sorts of things that we can't do. They just happen to be another species, and it doesn't matter that they're not cognitively like us. They have a whole other way of communicating, a whole other different value, a whole different set of ways that they experience the world, which is as important and equally morally significant as how we relate to the world. We just happen to think it's not because we're this species and we value our species more than we do other species because we've been dominating them and because we've domesticated them and enslaved them, we just think that they're our resources. But there's no difference. There's really no difference between the moral value of those other animals than there is those who we share our lives with. The cats, the dogs, those that we love, who we love, there's no moral difference between them and between us. The cat whom we live with has very similar interactions with us that, say, a cow would, if you ever got to know a cow, which most people don't, and they never have a personal relationship with a cow like they do with a dog or a cat. But if you've ever visited a sanctuary, a rescue sanctuary, and talked to those who run that rescue sanctuary, each of those animals is an individual. The pigs are individuals, and they interact with the others on that farm, and they interact with the humans who are caring for them in these sanctuaries. So this is something we just need to consider this. I used to be non-vegan once. I used to use animals. I used to eat them. I used to wear them. I used to go and see circuses. I used to go and see zoos. When I was taken by my godfather to the zoo, I saw all those animals, and I think I went to another zoo. I think I went to a Sydney zoo. And although I knew that this was sort of a very artificial setting, I didn't really see those animals as individuals. I didn't see them fully as the prisoners they were. I didn't think for a moment that dairy was problematic. I didn't think that they killed all of the male calves at a few days old when they could barely walk, that they took those male calves from their mother, and the mother was grieving and crying for days, and the calves were crying, and they were being dragged through the slaughterhouse, this horrific slaughterhouse with the smell of blood and all that fear. And this was all for my milk in my tea or my yogurt or my cheese. I didn't know that. I had no idea. But what I did know was that what I did believe is that dairy cows were in existence for me to use them for milk and for cheese. And I thought that they were I didn't think for a moment they were individuals. And you hear all this propaganda that they're happy or whatever. That's a nonsense. They have their young taken from them, and the tremendous grief. The mothers are artificially inseminated. I lived near a dairy farm, and I saw those poor mothers trudging down to be milked every day because it's painful to have udders that are not normal sizes. They're bred to be their udders to be very large, and it's very painful, and they often get inflammations. And those cows have to go down. They want to be milked. They've had their children taken from them who are supposed to be drinking that milk. And instead, another species is stealing that milk from them, killing their young and enslaving their female calves for something that's not only is it completely unnecessary for us, but it's actually killing us in the amounts that we're consuming that particular animal product. In fact, if you look online, there's quite a lot of evidence of so many things wrong with it, including neurotoxins in it, cancer-causing substances. In fact, one particular specialist really thinks that dairy is very responsible for the breast cancer rise. That's one of the reasons, and she's quite convinced of that. They've discovered too that a lot of tumours are ferrotoxic, and that when you eat meat, it actually greatly increases the chances of the growth of any of those that may be small cancer cells in the body that do exist. It actually exacerbates it and makes them grow because of the animal iron in it. There's so many things, and I'll leave some links, and if you want to check out my resource, howtogovegan.org, that actually has a lot of, it's an ethical site, but it has also nutrition information, so you can check out the scary problems with consuming animal products. But that's beside the point. Health is beside the point. These animals are sentient, and we don't have a right to use them. We just think we do because we've been indoctrinated to believe that. And we also don't have a personal relationship. We don't have a personal relationship with those animals because we haven't, most of us haven't grown up with them. And the only time we ever see them is if we happen to go on some trip and we see them in the field or something. But most animals aren't grazing in fields, but it doesn't matter. They're all being enslaved, and they all have their children taken from them, and eventually they're all killed. Eventually they're all killed in the same awful slaughterhouse. And they love life just like the dogs and cats that we live with, just like them. But they're all property, including your dogs and cats are viewed as property by society. And that's why it's important for us not only if we claim to love animals, right? If we claim to love animals, then we have to stop eating, wearing, and using them. But some people think that loving animals is just selecting certain species and fetishizing those animals. They think that's loving animals, loving certain species. If we claim that we think that they're morally important in any way, if they morally matter, then it makes sense. It's logical, isn't it, to consider that they're all equally morally valuable. It makes sense, doesn't it, not to just select certain species and think that one is something, that group is a group, that species is more important than the other species that I have on my plate or wearing on my back or my feet. It makes sense, doesn't it? And we have to stop ignoring the fact that they're sentient. There's no question that animals are sentient, that other animals are sentient. I mean, science, there's no question, and that includes fish. That includes aquatic life. There is a sentience there, and there is a love of life. They love life. Fish struggle for all they're worth while their mouth is being ripped and they're being dragged through the water. They're struggling for all they're worth. They're struggling for all they're worth to get away. And then they get pulled up and they're left suffocating. And it takes them, a minute or more to die. Suffocating, struggling and thrashing, wanting to live. They want to live. They don't want to die. And they have relationships with others in the ocean. So we have to try and get our heads around this and stop pretending let's stop pretending that they don't have an interest in life. Let's stop pretending that because they don't have the same abilities that we have, like they have different cognitive abilities to us. Let's stop telling ourselves that because they do, that they don't matter. Because there are humans who have different cognitive abilities too, that are disabled in some way, and we still value them. There are people in hospitals, I used to look after them, in neurosurgical intensive care units that don't have the same cognitive abilities that we have. They're unconscious, some of them, and sometimes they never regain consciousness. I've looked after people that have been unconscious for weeks, sometimes months, and they never ever regain consciousness, and yet we still treat them with respect. I would still talk to those patients whenever I did anything, any care for them, cleaning their mouths or whatever, rolling them over to change beds or to wash them. When I was looking after patients who were on ventilators and they never ever regain consciousness, right up until the time they die. And right from the time they come in, and they never show any sign of any consciousness or anything, any cognitive abilities at all, except reflex actions, right? All of us, the nurses there, we all treated them with respect and as if they were an individual that had moral personhood, that wasn't a thing, wasn't just a blob of flesh. Now, this is how we treat other humans, even when they are unconscious and they don't show any sort of sign of cognitive, any signs of recognition of any kind of ability to, any sort of signs of life, except not even breathing even. They're intubated. They're being artificially ventilated. And yet we still treat them as sentient beings who care about who have identities and have moral value. And this is because they're humans. You see how speciesist we are? That we have that regard for our own species, even when they show no signs of real life. And yet there are obviously sentient beings in the fields or in these cages, these awful cages, enriched cages and battery cages, or even the free-range industrialized settings that are just, it's a nonsense. They're just crowded and they reek of ammonia, burning their lungs. All these settings, all these individuals have obvious sentience and they love life. They truly do, and they do not want to die. And when they're in the slaughterhouse, they're struggling for for every last breath. They're struggling. They do not want to die. They're crying out. And every second of every day, there are literally thousands all over the world in slaughterhouses right now crying out for life. And who puts them there? We do. We put them there. We put them there because we are eating, wearing, and using them. We can consider them mistakenly as resources, that they're ours to do with whatever we wish. And every second of every day, until the end of the year, 1 trillion plus aquatic and land animals are being tortured and murdered. Every year that 1 trillion plus, all for trivial reasons of palate pleasure mostly, because we don't need animal products to survive. We can easily meet all our needs, all our nutrition needs from a plant-based diet and probably B12. That's probably all we need, is a supplement of B12, maybe some omega if you want to up your DHA levels, omega-3s, vegan omega-3s. It's very simple, and if that's all it takes to stop this tremendous violence and suffering, if that's all it takes, then I implore you, please be vegan, because we don't need these animal products, and they are such tremendous products of violence. And we could be living in a beautifully non-violent world, putting aside our own perchance for violence as humans. We're very violent toward one another. But if we start in our own lives by integrating non-violence into our own lives, if we do that, then it is for sure going to spread to other parts of life. I mean, if you care about the smallest insect, or if you care about the animals that are being used and tortured and killed and their children taken from them, if you care about those animals, you will most likely care about a lot of other things that are being done to humans. And you won't want that. You won't want that violence visited on those humans. And so it will start to transform the world if we care about the most vulnerable amongst us, non-human animals. We will care about humans, no matter where they are, no matter how different they may look to us and we look to them. We will care about them. It will transform the world. Becoming vegan and embracing the ethical position veganism will transform the world. And it will also have a tremendous impact on climate change, because 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal use industry. And I urge you to look that up. Watch the documentary Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret. So we need to do some research, but the point is that we don't need these animal products, and eating plant-based diet is delicious. It really, truly is. I've never been healthier, and every day I'm grateful for being vegan. Every single day. I often say that to friends. I'm so glad I'm vegan, particularly when I see the awful, awful things that are being visited on non-human animals. Just awful. And so unnecessary. We could have a vegan planet that is beautifully non-violent. We could have that. And we could have a non-violent planet because we transform the way we think about the most vulnerable amongst us. We could have that. We could have it right now, in fact. If all of us went vegan tomorrow, it would be a totally different planet. Totally different. And one only truly appreciates what it means to be vegan after being vegan a while and seeing what an amazing transformative effect it has on one's inner being, and also on lots of other things in life. Not to mention health, not to mention our carbon footprint, the methane that's put out there by animal industry and the destruction of waterways. So much is wrong. The destruction of the rainforests. 1 acre a second of Amazon rainforest is cleared for animal agriculture. It's the greatest destructive force in the Amazon rainforest. All this is not justifiable. It's not morally justifiable. And we're causing world hunger too, because lots of poorer countries are exporting grain to feed these animals in feedlots all over the world, and often Western countries. And that grain, and there's a huge amount of grain is used by cows and other animals it's a huge amount of grain. They eat huge amounts of grain. And what for? So we can kill them and then cut them up? These beautiful sentient beings. So please, please I implore you to consider going vegan. It will be one of the best decisions you make in your life. And please start thinking about looking at the animals that you share your house with, who you share your house with. Think about how they love life and think that there are other animals, the ones that are crying out in these slaughterhouses or on these awful farms, that are having their children taken from them, that are being castrated without anesthetic, that are having their beaks cut without anesthetic, that are having all sorts of awful things being done to them. Dairy cows being put on rape racks, they call them that in the industry, rape racks and artificially inseminated. Think about those animals and how we wouldn't want any of that to happen to those animals who share our lives. We would be horrified if somebody did the things that we are doing to those other animals, and that we would be horrified if somebody killed the animal who shares our life that we consider a family member. There's no difference between these animals, the ones on our plates, on our backs, and the ones we share our lives with. So thanks for listening. Please subscribe to this channel, and you can join me on Twitter and Facebook at Vegan Trove Extra. That's the username. And please consider checking out my podcast, howtogovegan.org, which has a lot of great information. I think you'll find it very, very useful. Thanks for listening. I'm Trish Roberts, and this is Faint Signals from Vega. Bye for now.